you know what? There's more to the story here. Don't leave the house.
Welcome to the Witness Box, everybody. I'm your host, Joshua Diaz, alongside Chris McDonough of The Interview Room, a seasoned homicide detective, and Dr. Gary Ricardo, a forensic psychologist, author of The New Evil, my co-hosts. And how are you guys doing tonight?
Doing great, Josh. So great to be here.
Good. Dr. Gary, how are you?
Very well.
Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate. Tonight, we're going to talk about the case of Summer Wells, the 5-year-old girl that went missing from Ben Hill Road. On the 15th of June, 3 years will have gone by with very little updates, and we'll jump into that. But this is a case that comes with kind of a lot of emotion and thoughts because, Chris, this is kind of how you and I sort of linked up because of the Summer Wells investigation. By covering the Summer Wells case, I have met a lot of people, and it's very personal to me, this case. And I know it is to you, Chris, because you were there. You went to Tennessee and you spoke with the mother, Candace Wells. You and I have both had many communications with Dawn Wells, sometimes hostile, sometimes not. Dr. Gary, you about what do you know this case about 2 or 3 months now, something like that?
Yeah, I learned a lot about it from you two, and then did some viewing of other videos and reading about it. And what I think is fascinating is that I drew a lot of the same conclusions that you guys did, even from looking at it independently. It just goes to show you. And I would definitely commend everybody to look at the interview that was done on the episode of The Lab, where we had on, Chris, what was that? What was the Steve Johnson? Right?
Steve, yep.
Yeah, from the Cold Case Foundation, who, is an expert at analyzing language and statements. And
I'll link it in the description.
Yeah, it was really
also
cool.
Chris, I will link your full uncut interview as well, because it really does set the scene. If there are new people on this case, they can go back. And I've always said this, Chris, because this situation, it blew up. The Summer Wells case blew up when I think that people that are involved did not expect it to get the notoriety and the attention that it get. We're talking about a back road little town. I would say people just, with no disrespect, hill people, I mean, they're country folk. And they keep to themselves and they stay away from, not society, but look, they don't really like the law. I mean, that's been apparent over the course of this investigation. Chris, but let me just say this. Let me ask you, because I know that you have been knee deep in this just as well as I have. What does this case mean to you? And why is it that, 3 years later, we're still here at this same spot?
Well, I think the case as a whole, it's not really a mystery. The case is what I would describe as an evidentiary circumstantial connection that needs to be, those dots need to be connected a little bit more. And unfortunately, the longer it takes, the more emboldened people get. But the one thing about missing children is it never goes away. The child may be missing for now, but the idea of finding her never goes away. It's not like an adult. Adults get lost, right? And people go, oh, that's a shame, where is she? Oh, she could have died, whatever. But not kids. Kids don't vanish from basements. on Ben Hill Road in Hawkins County, Tennessee.
In the middle of the day. And I remember you and I have done countless shows on this case. We've talked about it. We talk about it offline. We talk about it in our private life. It's something that's kind of always there. And one thing that you just said that I've always remembered as we dove into the players in this case, Dawn Wells, Candace Wells, parents of Summer Wells, that they have had a history of malfeasance, and that most of those things have been able to be pushed away, to either be fixed or forgotten about. And I remember one time you said, Dawn and Candace, you got to understand that this isn't going away. It's never going to go away. As long as you're here, it's not going away. And you had also promised that you weren't going away. And I also made that same promise. And I know that there's a lot of people that wait with bated breath to know the full story. Do you think we'll ever get that?
Well, to give you an idea of how powerful social media is today and whether or not something will go away, I'm just on Facebook and I just typed in Summer Wells and I just stopped counting 60 Facebook pages. Wow. And there's got to be another, I don't know, there's probably a couple hundred Facebook pages and maybe 100. I don't know. Let me go back here. Yeah, I'm Summer Wells. I'm missing. Can you help find me? And, just think about that math. Each one of these Facebook pages, some of them have, Catch Up with Jesus, Summer Wells, What Happened to Summer Wells, 271 members, 113 members, 161 members, 56 members. And the list just goes on. Summer Wells, Where Is She? 592 members. Now, if you just do the math and just add up each and every one of these individual persons, okay, that if they told one person who tells 3, who tells 10, who tells 15, who tells 100, there are hundreds of thousands of people that are going, 5-year-olds just don't disappear. And the family even has one in here, support group for Summer Wells family, okay.
Yeah. And there is a Facebook that I would recommend. It's called Summer Wells Vanished in Tennessee. It's a private group you get approved for, but there is almost 37,000 members.
Wow.
In this group. And they post about this every single day. They will clip whatever, when somebody speaks about Summer Wells and Chris, we've been featured on that Facebook page probably more times than we can count. They're big supporters of Summer Wells and her story. And so shout out to them. They do a fantastic job. They clip all of us and post it up there. They do this all day. I mean, there's just so many members, and you're completely right. People just don't forget about children. Dr. Gary, you've looked at a lot of investigations, and what'd you say?
Well, with children, it's far less likely that they can go off on their own. And it sort of lends itself to a couple of interpretations that are less likely with an adult, like wandering off and getting hurt or being abducted by a pervert or something else. I think you'd agree, Chris, that those are some of the things that commonly jump to mind when you have a missing child, right? But when the child wanders off, Chris, I don't know what your experience of it has been, but cases where there's somebody missing and then they turn out to be in the environment, it's usually not very far. They usually find them in a ravine or a body of water or etc. right nearby, right? Isn't that been your experience too?
Yeah, too.
Right. And if the child is abducted, I mean, what would be the reason for that unless it was some kind of sexually perverse offender? And that's quite rare. Obviously the first thing we would do is look at the local sex offenders and find out if there was anything like that going on. For example, remember the Charlotte Cena case where up in Saratoga, a child went missing from the park? And I was on Nancy Grace with her aunt. as the guest, who happened to be, I think, a journalist. And they talked about how they had spent some scores of hours searching around the park, thinking that the child had wandered off and was just in the park somewhere. She got hurt, she whatever. And I said, I think you're dealing with a sexual predator. I think somebody who snatched her without a word, took her right out of that park, and as a consequence, it's going to be a weird guy. It's weird pedophiles that don't talk to you, who just snatch you. So I said, I bet it's going to be some weird guy. He's going to be probably a local. Look at the local sex offenders. Probably didn't take her very far. Well, sure enough, turned out to be 100% true. It was a local weirdo who literally snatched her and pulled her into like a kind of
Camper.
Camper.
I said they'd find her in the shelf. Remember?
Yeah, you said in the closet or a shelf, and that's exactly what happened. She was in a cabinet, and so I think we kind of profiled that one pretty perfectly. And the guy, who was very bizarre as predicted, was a sex offender who was like out, and had like finished his time and wasn't going to be on the registry maybe or something like that, and then just kind of acted out again, if I understood the story correctly. And you can imagine how traumatized that kid was, that kind of thing. Because even when they get taken, even less common is killing. And then you're dealing with a serial killer, right? So then you start thinking like in that, first you've got the rarity of like the sex offense, and then you've got the killing, right? That's a lot rarer, and it just keeps getting rarer and rarer. So that's why I'm a very big fan of like an Occam's razor kind of way of thinking. Like, what's the simplest thing that happened? Well, simplest thing is she never left the house. That kind of thing. You kind of start simple and go from there. It's like the first question should be like, is there anyone who has a motive to eliminate her? Because there is no evidence of an intruder or a sex offense by a stranger or anything like that. I think you both would agree. We have meticulously dissected it from every angle. And to top it off, there's a context that's very weird and neglectful, with her living in a kind of dungeon for a room, a kind of hideous environment, multiple children having been taken out of the home already. I mean, it's a very suspicious situation, right?
If we look at, and I know we're going to talk about it, but you just raised such a valid point. If we look at this Maddie Soto murder that just happened in Florida.
Oh, such a sad story.
She didn't even have her own bedroom.
Oh, yeah, she was sleeping with him sometimes, right? Or often.
Yeah, but here's the interesting thing here is they had a partition where they had roommates renting rooms out of the condo there, and Maddie was, then sent to the basic, living room. And if we look at this 5-year-old little girl, and Maddie didn't have a chance, by the way, but if we look at this 5-year-old Summer, and she's only 5 still, because that's the age she disappeared. She's not had a birthday yet. Okay. And if we look at her living conditions, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to get into that house and get down into the, I didn't know she was in the basement. I did not know that was going to be her living quarters. I thought when I first walked into that house, I saw the 2 bunk beds in that very first room, and I thought, okay, maybe this is her room. But Candace walked right past it and started narrating that her 2 sons or the 3 boys were sitting there watching, video games, et cetera, et cetera. And then she walks around that cabinet, which was a basic countertop. And I couldn't see what she was seeing because where I was standing. And then I walked around there and I saw this hole with this narrow, maybe a foot and a half, 18, 20 inches wide staircase. And I remember looking, trying to look down into that. And she stepped into it backwards and went down it. And I was thinking, holy crap. This is, what are we going in here? What's going in here? right? And she's like, this is the way my husband comes, so you can come down this way. Because I asked, I said, is there another way to get into this thing? And that's when she says to me, no, Don takes it this way, basically. I was like, okay. And I didn't know what I was going into, to be honest with you. I've been down a lot of dark places in my time. And I thought, okay, it's a 5-year-old little girl. Let's feel what she felt. And I got to tell you, I was not feeling comfortable. Can you imagine what she was feeling every single night going down into that basement, and the mildew, the smell, the mist, the walls, the windows being covered with reflective covering, the entire basement disheveled, just tore up. And then I looked over and there's a mattress on the floor. And I'm thinking, is this hers? Oh no, that's the parents'. And there's no door stopping anyone from walking into either side of those two cinder block, or that one cinder block partition. So full access. I'm here to tell you, and I will submit to you, that child did not have a chance. And again, I always go back to the idea that, people are circling them, the family and the mom and the dad, and saying, why do you constantly talk about the parents and everything? Well, the reason I talk about them is because their 3 children were taken away by the state of Tennessee to protect them.
Going on 3 years now.
To protect them is why the state took them away. And what do the parents always claim? The state stole our children. Really?
Well, and I'll tell you, Chris, one thing that you've said, so you've said a couple of things that have always stuck out to me, and not just to me, but people that follow this case, religiously, on that video. And I don't know if it seemed like it just kind of came out, but you turned and you looked at Candace after you had done basically a 360 and had examined the place. You turned and looked at Candace and you said, I now understand Summer. You said that right to her face. And I don't think that she understood what you meant by that. And because then you said, thank you. And she says, you're welcome. But I could see you, if you watch the video, you're taking it all in, and then you go, I understand Summer. Thank you. What did you mean by that?
Well, you'll notice a couple things. When I walked in there, I saw the picture up there on the wall. And I asked, who's that? And Candace said, oh, that's my sister, Rose.
Called her Rosie. Yeah.
Rosie. Okay.
Yeah.
Remember I tell the story about Jigsaw John staring at the walls? And he said, you'll be surprised what those walls teach you. Well, as I'm going down the stairwell, I'm looking all around me, but specifically on the walls. And what's the first thing I see? I see, the TV on with soft, whatever that show was, I don't think it was, it was soft porn.
It was like a Girls Gone Wild sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what everybody said, but
the point of that is, Chris, that there was somebody on the TV, a woman, on somebody's shoulders flashing the screen. And I know that people were like, oh, that obviously whatever was being watched, that's exactly what you saw. I mean, what are you supposed to do about that?
Right. No, exactly. But you see, from an investigative analysis aspect, is this idea of what information are you taking in immediately? Okay. I will call it situational awareness, because I'm going down into a dark crevice. I don't know what's at the bottom. So the only thing I can do is reflect back and depend on my training and my gut. And what's my gut telling me? I immediately I see, the front side of this TV illuminating the room. So when I got down to the bottom, immediately I looked to the left, and I looked over and I caught the bed. And then I looked around at the walls, and I saw that the walls were barren. And then I saw the one door, and then immediately I turned to my right as I'm turning. Okay, I'm turning the camera, but I'm actually looking the other way. And then what's the first thing I see? I see that the window has a piece of reflective barrier on it, right? So it's like they're shutting that room down. And then when I scanned into that room, I'm looking at the walls and everything against the walls. And what's the first thing I see? I see that shelf with all the various different toys, the whatever it was, the VCR player, if I remember right. I
She
got
had
to
some
watch it.
DVDs and a couple of toys.
Right. And Candace, her focus was into those items to tell me about, Summer. When I asked her, I said, is this Summer stuff? But I was looking, if you'll notice, the camera's moving along the walls. Okay. Because like I've always said, this wall behind me, that's part of my life. There's a huge message. That wall behind you, there's part of your life, Josh. And of course, Dr. Picotto, everything in our lives, sometimes reflective in our personal life, gives us a little insight into that secret life. And that's how I felt when I was looking for Summer stuff. And when I saw nothing other than, some disheveled, beat up toys,
Right.
I knew everything I needed to know about Summer. She's just an enigma to this family. She's just there. And there just doesn't disappear. There was a deeper story to being just there as Summer Wells.
I call it an oubliette.
Yeah, exactly.
Dungeons in a medieval times. Yeah.
When you first saw it, I mean, were you stunned by what you saw?
It was like something out of a horror movie. And what I thought was very bizarre was the contrast between the Pollyannish picture that they were attempting to paint of her, with the flowers and the out in the yard and the whatever, and as I always say, the backyard looked like Yucca Flats, when they test the bombs there, just blown to smithereens. I mean, it was horrifying, and it was almost dystopian, like something out of like a sci-fi movie or something. Just really, really bad. The opposite of anything that a child would need to thrive. Still, the child looks happy. She was smiling and so forth in pictures.
Yeah, but you know just as well as I do, like you said, that Candace was showing off the toys that Summer had. She would say, whenever I have, spare money, I spend it on the kids. I spend it on the kids. She was saying that kind of stuff. Nice picture of this happy family of 6.
Right.
And, it's just Dawn and Candace now in that home. They're still there. All the children are gone. I do not believe under any circumstances that they are getting their children back. They have, in fact, lost custody of children in the past from their first marriages or relationships. Candace has also given up I believe a child was taken from Candace at birth after she tested positive for drugs, I believe, and she was homeless at the time. This was right before, I believe, she met Dawn. But she had 2 other children taken as well. And then you have Dawn, who has probably one of the sketchiest histories of anybody that's not on death row that I've ever seen personally. I mean, I've had many conversations with this guy, most of them contentious, some of them calm. He's not a very nice person. And that's just my personal opinion. But I don't just base that on the interactions that I've had with him. I base that on, in 2020, Candace had filed charges against him for abuse. And she had a handwritten note to the court that said that he gets drunk, he throws things, he hurts me, he threatens to hurt the children, and that she's scared for her children and her mother against Dawn Wells. This was a year before. It was, let me see, it was in December 20. So it was about 6 months before Summer goes missing. The charges were eventually dropped by Candace, which seems to be kind of a standard thing with Dawn, because in the past he's been brought up on domestic violence charges before. And if you read the cop's report, I mean, he punched his ex-wife Pam directly in the nose. The cop wrote and saw it, and he was charged with it. It was later on dropped. So, you know, there seems to be this pattern of behavior. Now, we're gonna listen. This is the 3-year disappearance piece that WJHL did that have been covering. Ansley Daniels is the one that's kind of been on this case, and I got to tell you, before we get into it, and it's just a little 3.5 minute clip. When we're finished here, I'm going to bring up the article, because the puff piece here that you'll see leaves out one of the most important things. And I don't know if you saw. Did you read the article, Chris, after watching this?
I haven't.
As soon as we're done there, I'm going to bring that up. You know, when to.
Well, this Saturday marks 3 years since the disappearance of then 5-year-old Summer Wells from her Hawkins County home.
The night she was reported missing, authorities said Summer was last seen walking from her home on Ben Hill Road in the.
And I want to say that is incorrect. Actually, what was said, that they never said that the sheriff never said that she was walking away from her home.
Beach Creek community out.
What's that, Chris?
Well, first of all, Candace never said that. I stood right there in front of her.
Yeah, and I don't know where they get this one from. They say it every time, too. And yeah, you're right. Candace never said that.
She didn't say, yeah, she was out walking and disappeared. She said she went in the basement and vanished. I mean, that's a huge, make sure we get it accurate, discrepancy from the news, because feeding that narrative then takes away from the truth. You know, you have the mother on video, and anybody can go watch that video that I did with her. And she says, I mean, for me, that would have been a huge piece of the puzzle for her to say, yeah, you know, she was out walking on the road and she vanished. Really? Okay, let's go down to the road. Show me where. And how do we know this? Fake news.
Hours later, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation would issue an endangered child alert for her. That would later turn into an Amber Alert.
To this day, law enforcement still has not located Summer Wells and are not any closer to finding her. News Channel 11's Ansley Daniels spoke with Summer's parents.
We have pushed investigators for months to learn about new details or updates in this case. What we do know is that her family continues their search to bring Summer home.
Okay, and never mind.
I spoke with both Dawn and
I just the way that they portray it, that drives me nuts. I know it's a personal opinion, but I've been following this case from the very beginning. I know that Candace threw away 4,000 flyers that were given to her. Don told his sister on the phone, we have the phone record of it, that Candace threw away 4,000 flyers. That's a lot of flyers.
Candace Wells in Kingsport at a place with deep meaning to Summer's disappearance. Borden Park is anything but quiet this time of year. But 3 years ago, it was filled almost weekly with people praying for Summer Wells.
I see all these families, you know, with their kids and how much they enjoy them and stuff. And we were stripped away from all our kids. All our kids have been kidnapped from us by DCS, and who knows, we're not sure about Summer, but we know about where our boys are at.
I already knew, Chris. I already knew.
You know, I mean, here's a career criminal. He's been in multiple penitentiaries around the United States. Okay. He's still ripping off his parents even to this day. We know that's a fact.
That's a fact.
And Don, we know it, because hopefully if you're listening. And, you know, here's a guy who his 5-year-old daughter's missing. And the state of Tennessee has kidnapped his children. Now, I find that's an interesting word, using the word kidnapping. Okay. I think that's a really interesting choice of words. But, the fact that he is, again, he's shifting his blame. Gary, what say you?
It's possible. I mean, it has that kind of projective quality where you're accusing someone of that which you perhaps have done yourself. If that's what you're implying. That it's a little blame shifting there.
Oh, he's known to do that. He's done that with all of us.
Right. That kind of projection of that's intriguing.
Oh, and by the way, and so just for the listeners, the truth of the matter is that Don was served with papers saying that he had 24 hours to surrender his children, or that they were going to come take them and he would be thrown in the pokey for not complying with a court order. He then went to claim that people to this day still don't know the exact reason why the children were taken, and Don and Candace aren't spilling the tea on that, which is their prerogative. But Don said that he reached out because everything was so crazy with Summer going missing. He says, I begged them to come take the kids. And then it goes from now that that it looks terrible that they never have gotten the children back. It's that their children have been taken, kidnapped by DCS. So,
just out of curiosity, how big is that bridge in Brooklyn, Gary?
Even the one you're going to sell someone who believes the story? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, that one. So It's been 3 years. So the oldest was how old, Josh? When
I think he was 13.
So he's 16 now. The oldest boy right now is 16. He's actually progressing in life, okay? And so are the other two. They've each added 3 years of life. And they've been out of this environment now for 3 solid years. And the state of Tennessee is not giving them back. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that. And I also have heard from Don personally that not only were they never planned on being given back, but that the boys themselves said that they don't want to go back. Don and Candace both admitted that to me.
Okay. So Don's got 2 more years to wait, and then those children can be abused again, at least the oldest one. Yeah. I mean, let's just be honest with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, the state of Tennessee just does not come into families' homes and say, hey, by the way, we need your kids. Okay. And Don goes, oh, thank goodness you're here. I was worried about them too. Absolutely. Go ahead, take my children. Go ahead and take them. Get them out of here. How many parents listening to this right now would give up your children to any state where you might live for their protection? Protection from who? That's an interesting perception.
It gets worse.
We were stripped away from all our kids. All our kids have been kidnapped from us by DCS, and we're not sure about Summer, but we know about where our boys are at.
While the prayer vigils are now few and far between.
That's an interesting. The 3 were taken away from, kidnapped from Department of Child Services, but we're not sure about Summer. Okay.
Dawn and Candace Wells haven't stopped praying that their daughter.
Does Candace look happy to be there?
Summer will be found.
We have hope, always. I mean, but there's not much hope in this world. We have to trust God that there's hope in eternal life in heaven.
He went right to he went right to death. He says we have hope, but there's not much hope in this world, but we have eternal life. Okay? So where again, he did this in the very beginning. Isn't that interesting? That time has 3 years time has not changed his perception about seeing Summer dead. And in the very beginning, remember he used to say, for some reason I see her maybe in a dungeon being tortured, but I know I'll see her in the resurrection. Now here he is 3 years later, and he is still in the resurrection. Why? If your child is missing, I've talked to many families. They're like, no, my son or daughter's still alive. No, I'm waiting for her to come home. It's going to happen. I know it. I can feel it, or whatever. Okay. They don't put her in a dungeon somewhere being raped, tortured, because remember that was his verbiage.
Well, Michael Vaughn's mother still says that. Randy Neal about that.
Seth Rogers is saying it. And so this father here is going, where's he going with this? I want to hear this.
On June the 15th of 2021.
We know that she was taken off her property, and we know she was taken away in a vehicle, or they would have found her in the area if she was somewhere in the area. But who's responsible for her? We don't know.
I asked Don and Candace when was the last time they heard from investigators.
This is very important here.
We haven't lately at all. It's been a while, over a year, I think. I haven't talked to any law enforcement at all.
It's been over a year. They haven't talked to any law enforcement at all.
But look how he describes that. We haven't lately at all. And he looks over at Candace for confirmation, i.e. follow my track here. Okay. And then all of a sudden it's a year.
Yeah. And I think it's longer than that. And the only reason I say that is because on a conversation that him and I had, which was over a year ago, I asked him the last time that he had spoken to law enforcement, and this was over a year ago. And he says, we haven't talked to law enforcement in months. And then he chuckled. And then Candace chuckled too.
I tried to talk to the FBI agent about it, but that didn't go anywhere.
Don says he feels that he and his wife Candace were targeted by the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office.
They intimidated us, they belittled us, and done everything they could amidst all the chaos. And then the CPS was there doing the same thing.
When asked about how he thinks about Summer's disappearance 3 years later, Don spoke about a Department of Children's Services investigation.
They said somebody had called and said that we was giving our kids loaded guns to play with. And so they closed the case June 14th, which is something CPS does not do. They don't just close cases. So it's really odd and mystifying why they closed the case June. Summer
goes missing the next morning. So he's talking about DCS closing the case on June 14th, the very next morning or the next day around, the afternoon time is when Summer goes missing.
Yeah, but you see what else he's done here? He's now introduced into the conversation 3 years later, a car. Okay? We know she was taken in a car. Well, how do you know that, Don? The cops don't know that. Go back to listen to what he said carefully. Remember, it used to be a red truck, but now it's a car.
Property. We know she was taken away in a vehicle.
On the 15th of 2021.
We know that she was taken off her property. We know she was taken away in a vehicle, or they would have found her in the area.
Okay, in a vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe. Go ahead.
Of course she was.
Well, right. But you see, at this point, where is this vehicle? Because I thought it was the dog trail.
Well, it might be parked in their driveway.
Well, but I don't know, right? But the story, again, keeps adapting. Go back. Let's put this in context so we're all correct.
An eternal life in heaven.
Summer was reported missing on June the 15th of 2021.
We know that she was taken off her property. We know she was taken away in a vehicle, or they would have found her in the area if she was somewhere in there.
We know she was taken off of our property. We know she was taken in a vehicle, but then he gives or they would have found her. Okay. You know what? That could be true. That could be very true. The question is, whose vehicle and how do you know this? And that's what an investigator should be asking. You know, Don, we saw you on the news the other night. Whose vehicle are you talking about? And how do you know this? Well, because I've been telling you this from the very beginning. You're right. And we don't have any evidence of a vehicle being in your neighborhood at that time. So let's clarify and talk about this a little bit more, shall we? You know, this guy is a master manipulator. A master manipulator. If we look at how cool of a cucumber Steven Stearns is in the Madeline DeSoto case, knowing that he strangled her and casually put her in his trunk and drove around. But when you see him on the news, I'm missing her. There's just so much. It's destroying us. Really? This guy, in my opinion, it's just my opinion. He's not fooled me from day one. And the longer this goes on, the more exposed Don Wells will become. That's my opinion. And I can't wait to be there at one day.
But who's responsible for her? We don't know.
I asked Don and Candace when was the last time they heard from investigators.
We haven't lately at all. It's been a while, over a year, I think. I haven't talked to any.
See how he leans into her?
I tried to.
When he's talking?
Yeah, he's looking for, like she gives a nod or whatever. And as somebody that has spoken to Don countless times, there are times, Dr. Gary, where when I'm having a conversation with him, and sometimes the conversation does kind of go in a different direction and, we get off subject. He's not terrible to conversate with at times. And then when you come back to the reality of what we're talking about, and Chris is completely correct. You kind of feel bamboozled, sort of, in a way where he does do a really good job of manipulating the conversations, and he does a really good job of diverting and into a different direction. I mean, I'm sure that you see a lot of that with a lot of people that you interview, because you interview an awful lot of people.
Sure. Well, look, I can't make a diagnostic statement about this person who I haven't examined, but I will tell you the trait you're describing is very common in people who have aberrant personalities. Let's put it that way, because people of that type are projecting a persona or something to you. And if you take the conversation anywhere that they do not want to go, you get too close to something they don't want to talk about, etc., they feel a little out of control, and they're very good at rapidly turning the conversation back to where they want it to go. Because and if you do get too close, that kind of personality tends to explode. They'll start, using expletives or getting angry or calling you an idiot or something like that, until you get sort of shepherded back to where you want to go. It's an interesting thing about that kind of person is you could have a very long conversation with them and walk away feeling that you've actually learned nothing.
Yeah.
Or that you've heard the same thing over and over and over and over and over. You just can't get a question in there that leads to, a different answer. The problem with that kind of person is that they sometimes accidentally screw up and contradict themselves or whatever. And there's always an explanation for why there was a contradiction, or why there, is a kind of masterful evasion. Wouldn't you say, Chris? I mean, that's how it comes across. Like, I'll talk about what I want to talk about. And that's the end of it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, he does come across like that, but I don't think he expected for, that everybody would be a carnival barker.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. And say, here's $10. I weigh 20 pounds. Okay. And
right.
you're going to believe me. And because when we started looking into his background, and then people started seeing it.
Yeah.
They started to seeing his behavior, and it became pretty clear, pretty fast that, he was on YouTube calling in, cussing people out, using the N word, using the C word, I mean, the guy was just brutal. But you see, that's I used to love, and I still do, and I just talked to a guy the other day on something, and you could tell that he was just going to go all day long, and I finally got to a place with him. I said to him, "Are you done?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "You've been talking for about 2.5 hours about all this stuff. Are you finished?" And he goes, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Look, you have not convinced me in any way, shape, or form. Are you ready?" And he goes, "Okay." And next thing you know, his entire story changed, and everything lined up with the evidence that was in front of us. Okay? And then he finally looked at me and he goes, "Well, that was kind of a waste of time, wasn't it?" I said, "Yeah, it was. You wasted your time and you wasted my time. You're right. It was a waste of time." And this is why Don would not call me when I was in Tennessee, because he knew that I wasn't buying, stuffed elephants at the carnival ping pong ball toss. Okay. He was selling stuffed animals, and he continues to do it to this day. So I give him an E for effort. Okay?
Yeah.
But an F for content, because the content here is Summer. He should have focused in a true person. And this is the difference between interviewing somebody that's tied up to a wall or hanging from a ceiling as an interrogator, okay, and catching these guys and sitting across the room from the devil and have the devil look at you right in the eye and say, "You know who I am, don't you?" "Yes, I do. I know who you are. I've seen it." So pull the mask off and let's get there. Okay. But this guy, I give him, again, I go back to an F for the content, because this is a news story about Summer. And what did it turn into? A news story about how he has been victimized, how his wife has been victimized. And who are the perpetrators? Hawkins County Sheriff's Department, okay? Department of Child Services. They're the suspects in this case. Okay? And that is classic, deception.
Yeah, and it's also it's noteworthy that the sheriff Ronnie Lawson has said that they're not cooperating in this investigation anymore. And from the very beginning, they said that everybody that's involved with Summer is a suspect, meaning, the people near and dear.
Yeah, and you'll hear him say, "Oh, a year ago? It's been a year." I.e., we'll talk to him tomorrow.
Right.
No, you won't. No, you won't. Stop the charade.
And once, like I said, at the end of this video, I'm going to share something with you.
To talk to the FBI agent about it, but that didn't go anywhere.
Don says he feels that he and his wife Candace were targeted by the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office.
They intimidated us, they belittled us, and done everything they could amidst all the chaos. And then the CPS was there doing the same thing.
When asked about how he thinks about Summer's disappearance 3 years later, Don spoke about a Department of Children's Services investigation.
They said somebody had called and said that we was giving our kids loaded guns to play with. And so they closed the case June 14th, which is something CPS does not do. They don't just close cases. So it's really odd and mystifying why they closed the case June 14th, and then 24 hours later, Summer's gone.
Summer's mother, Candace, sat in for part of our interview, but got up after a few questions.
She was going to try, but her emotions are just too much.
The last update in the Summer Wells case from law enforcement.
Can you guys play back the part where he says yada yada yada, and then whatever number of hours later, Summer was? Can I hear that line again?
Yeah, how far back was that?
Oh, it was like, and then whatever number of hours later, Summer was missing. that line. It was like about 1 minute ago.
They said somebody had called and said that we was giving our kids loaded guns to play with. And so they closed the case June 14th, which is something CPS does not do. They don't just close cases. So it's really odd and mystifying why they closed the case June 14th, and then 24 hours later, Summer's gone.
Summer's mother.
That's it. Now that seems to me to be an important piece of information. Chris and Josh, is that a colossal coincidence? What does that mean? They close a case and 24 hours later the other child is missing?
Well, the
Or
thing,
is it the same child?
the thing,
Child, 24 hours? Which child was the case closed 24 hours before Summer goes missing?
we don't know. It supposedly was on the boys. Now, they've done this smoke and mirrors thing with the CPS cases, and so we don't really know exactly, the details of it. But the thing about it is, he says he and this didn't come out till later anyway, but what he says here is that the boys were playing with loaded guns and that they closed the case on the 14th. 24 hours later, Summer goes missing. We don't even know if there was a case that was actually closed, Dr. Gary. We don't even know.
Okay.
I think that the case was open. I know that there were cases. I know because they admit that there were cases. But as of a case being closed, we have never had confirmation of that ever, right, Chris?
Right. And if the case was closed, here's your boys.
Correct.
I mean, the courts, the state of Tennessee, they don't accidentally, take 3 kids and keep them for 3 years and longer. Okay? And I liken that statement to the new vehicle statement. And we know she was taken off of this property and in a vehicle, oh, really? Okay, well, how do you know this? How do we know this information? Other than you just saying it, help me understand it. Because one, you were supposed to be at work. And why isn't your wife saying this? Why isn't your wife, who was last in the presence of this 5-year-old, telling the public, telling the world, well, we know that she was taken off this property in a vehicle? No, that's not what the wife says. The wife says, Summer, where are you? And I go down in the basement and she's not there. Summer. So I come up, where's Summer? Where's Summer? Then the story was, well, she must have walked out the door. Well, I wasn't sure if the door was locked or the door was open. And then the story was, no, somebody came up through the door and took her out that door, ran down the dog path, and took off. Okay. Then the story was, no, Department of Child Safety or Child Services took her. Okay. And they, somehow they're hiding out with her. And, Hawkins County Sheriff's Department's in cahoots with them. And if you look at this right now on the screen here that you have here from the news, okay, they don't miss this child. They're not missing a beat. And I will submit to you, that's because they know a lot more. And they're not fooling anybody, because here's the reality of this kind of case. It will never go away. It'll never go away. That child, you can't put limits on a limitless God. God will open a door or a window, and some investigator will feel that breeze, and it will be summer breeze. And everybody will know Okay, there's more to this story than we're hearing and feeling, because I've been in so many of these cases and seen them, and I that's why I think Stephen Stearns did the world a disservice by killing that child, but he gave investigators a gift, and that gift was he projected how these individuals behave.
Candace sat in for part of our interview, but got up after a few questions.
They closed the case June 14th, and then 24 hours later, Summer's gone.
Summer's mother, Candace, sat in for part of our interview, but got up after a few questions.
She was going to try, but her emotions are just too much.
The last update in the Summer Wells case from law enforcement was an age-progressed photo released.
Do you believe that?
That it's too much for Candace?
Yeah.
No. I think it's too much for her to be questioned about what happened. But I don't think that it's I don't think it's overwhelming her as a grieving mother. That's just my personal opinion, but no, I don't feel that way. I've never felt that way.
Yeah,
because
she
she seems to do really fine in other situations. You know, she seems to do really well.
She did the same thing in Dr. Phil, remember?
Yeah.
She got up and walked off the stage. So she's 2 for 2.
2 for 2.
Released in June of last year. This image was released by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. If you have any information about the whereabouts of Summer Wells, call 1-800-TBI.
Now, so that aside here, and you know, look, this we have ad nauseum. If you go over to the interview room, if you go over to the lab, and if you want to hear more about this case, Dr. Gary has weighed in on it. Chris has weighed in on it. I've weighed in on it. Go check out our videos on this, and it'll give you an even more in-depth look into this case. But as we finish up here, Chris, I wanted to tell you, and Dr. Gary as well, I know that a lot of people saw the video, and I know of the 3-year anniversary or mark or whatever you want to call it. And for some reason, I don't know why they did this, but I went into basically it's word for word in the article what was in the video, except the part where they talked about it's been a while, over a year, I think, the police. Okay. So I'm reading this, and I'm just going to read it to you. Quote, "It's been a while, over a year, I think. I haven't talked to any law enforcement at all. I tried to talk to the FBI agent about it, but that didn't go anywhere," said Wells. Quote, "It's probably a good thing not to hear from Hawkins County, in my opinion." Unquote.
Yeah, just like a
Why would that be a good thing?
because that's what criminals say. It's a good thing not to be around the cops. You don't want to be around the cops. Are you kidding me? Who wants to be around the cops? It's probably a good thing not to hear from Hawkins County, in my opinion. It was probably a good thing for him not to, hear from the investigators who investigated him for Mary and, their family.
But isn't that who he would hear from if they found his kid?
Yeah, they're the lead agency.
Of course.
So one of the hypotheses that I've suggested, if there is any culpability in this story, it was probably some kind of elimination murder. And if it's an elimination murder, then there's something very revealing about the statement. It's probably a good thing not to hear from Hawkins County.
Well, I think no matter what.
Well, yeah, because what's the implication that either they would have found her?
Well, it is a good thing for them.
Or that they would figure out that she's deceased.
Because the next time that they probably hear from them, hopefully, would either be, hey, we have a lead, or we have found Summer, or hey, guess what? You're going to jail for this crime.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. And I'm guessing that they don't expect Hawkins County to go, hey, guess what? We found Summer alive and well. She's doing great. She was kidnapped.
Therefore, hearing
Yeah.
from them could only mean
One
trouble.
thing. Only
That's
one
exactly
thing.
the point. And that's, you took the words out of my mouth, because if it's an elimination situation, well, you already know she's gone. So there's only one thing that could happen if you hear from them, and it's bad. Otherwise, they'd be thrilled to hear. Right?
Well-
Which also reveals, of course, not wanting the person for some reason. I mean, that gets to this question that I really hope you'll touch on before we end, which is, what on earth would be the motive if this was an elimination, murder, or whatever? If this kid was taken out of the world by this family, just thought experiment, because I can't say that, of course, there's no formal allegation or anything like that. Just people have suspicions. If that happened, why?
Well, so she was going to start kindergarten at the end of the summer, and a lot of speculation, a lot of allegations, particularly when it comes to Don's past behavior with his stepsisters at a certain age, and it was just kind of repeated and repeated, which is actually what triggered. And we don't really have time to go into all that, but it's what triggered Summer going missing, is what triggered his stepsisters to get a hold of the FBI, get a hold of TBI, and say, I need to tell you what was done to me by the father of the missing child when I was a kid. And so there are people that suspect or think that he may have been doing inappropriate things to her, and that it was going to be exposed when she went to kindergarten or going to get checkups from the doctor or whatever. Now there's also people think that there's could be an accident cover-up situation as well, that something negligent happened, and that they couldn't they don't want to go back to jail because they already had cases open against them, things like that. But the big theory is that inappropriate behavior was going on. It's hard not to envision that when you listen. I'm friends with Jeannie and Mary. I've formed a friendship with them. I love both of them very much, and they'll be a part of my life forever. I talk to Mary, every couple of weeks still, and Jeannie and I message from time to time, and I really do think that they're wonderful ladies. I believe them 100%. And matter of fact, the prosecuting at the time when Utah was looking into it, they absolutely believed it, because they opened cases, 3 different cases on Don, and Don admitted to doing it. He's admitted it. His own words, many times. So it's hard to ignore that fact. What do you think, Chris?
Well, my opinion is obviously tainted because of my experience level.
Yeah, but I don't think it's tainted. I think that it's at a premium.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've not left that house that day.
And there's the other one. Sorry for interrupting you. There's the other phrase that has stuck with everybody that follows this case. Chris, when you said the first time you ever said, I have not left that house, and when you said that you understood Summer, those were the 2 key phrases that have always stuck with me and many other people. But yes, go ahead.
Well, I mean, what are the odds of me running into him that day and later on discovering that there were multiple sexual assault victims, and it just so happened to be the guy that lived in that house? What are the odds of that? Right? And take me out of the picture. Just take me out of the picture. There were also other investigators in Utah that even interviewed him in jail. And he said, remember, he told us, well, there were only, 2. Okay, or something to that effect, maybe 3, when in fact there was a total stranger that came forward to the police and went down there and said, I need to tell you something. It happened to me too. And he's the guy. What are the odds that that guy would have a son who's a RSO in the state of Utah? That is a learned behavior. Typically and traditionally, i.e. experience-wise, from the father. Okay, boys learn how to molest from their fathers. Okay. And isn't it interesting that the only girl in the home outside of mom just miraculously disappears at the same age as the first victim who called and said, I was 5 when it started. Now, so that only leaves a couple of things. Either SA, and it was getting serious. Either she fell down the stairs. It was an accident. Okay. Those, you know, there aren't a whole bunch of possibilities here. You know, because remember, it was bears and lions and, you know, all this other stuff, you know, before. Okay. But when you lay over every word this guy has ever said, I said the day I met him, he will adapt and he will improvise the story. That adaptation now has gone from the dog trail to she's in a car or in a vehicle.
Right.
Okay.
But Chris,
Yeah.
that suggests to you that she was taken in a car by whoever eliminated her?
Yeah, or disposed of her.
Right, for disposal. Right, that's what I'm getting at. The we know she was taken in a car could imply a memory of the self as opposed to knowledge of what someone else did. Right.
Half truths, like Soto. She was asleep in the car.
Mm-hmm.
No, she wasn't. She was dead.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you know, she was in your trunk, and they have you on video putting her in the trunk, dead.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I hope
Awful.
that's just Don always needs to remember one thing. He keeps talking about God and how the resurrection and everything is going to happen. But what he forgets is the collector is coming. And that will be the adversary. He's going to collect on this debt. Okay? And when that day comes, whatever that day is, and when it is, and by the way, it will come. Because the collector does not let dues get unpaid. They get paid constantly. Okay? And, you know, at some point, he's going to collect. And guess what? Summer's going to be right there watching.
Yep.
And it's going to, I have no idea when that day comes, but whoever hurt that little girl, the Lord has written down in the book of life, okay, I see this one. That's the one thing, you know, I've talked to many child killers. And it's the one thing, when I saw Soto, I thought, this guy's classic. He's absolutely classic. And now we get all this document dump about what he did and how he did it. One day we're going to get a document dump. And it's going to be brutal. But they need to find, and what Don is hoping is that they don't find her ever. Okay? And that's okay if you're here on this earth. Okay? But there will be a collection, and it'll be a lot bigger than what we can collect here.
Well said, Chris. And I think that's probably a good place for us to stop tonight. Like I said, if you want more in-depth conversation on this, you can go to the interview room. You can go to the lab, and Dr. Gary has weighed in. Steve Johnson has weighed in from the Cold Case Foundation as well, and there's a whole lot to it. And so I believe it's this Saturday, the 15th, will be 3 years. Summer Wells went missing when she was 5 from her home in the Beach Creek area, Kingsport, and it's been a circus, to say the least. It's been one of the most wild, outrageous cases that I've ever heard of. And, you know, Chris, it's funny when you said, I've been doing this for how long? And you said, I've never seen anything, you know, with the characters and the people coming out of the woodwork and stuff. You always say, I've never seen anything quite like this one before.
Well, I actually, yeah. And, you know, the characters, I've seen the characters before. I've never seen the level of disbelief before. But until Seth Rogers. And now, you know, that one in of itself is taking on its own life. And we'll let that sit there. And I think if we were to just change this verbiage just a couple of words, right? Look how messaging gets changed. And how it can change a perception in relationship to the power of words. As scripture said, as sharp as a two-edged sword. And I'm going to quote this again from you, Josh. It's probably a good thing not to hear from Hawkins County, in my opinion. So in his opinion, he doesn't want to hear from Hawkins County. And in my opinion, it would probably be a great thing to hear from Hawkins County, especially while you have the breath of life on this earth, because Hawkins County will not be available in the resurrection, but Summer will.
Amen to that. Dr. Gary, anything going out?
No, I think that's that about sums it up. And you know, I think we'll just dedicate the episode to Summer and to victims of these kinds of what appears to be, you know, listen, I hate to say it, but I think based on statistics, probably child homicide. I mean, I know that it's not official, but I think you would agree that the probability of this child still being alive is quite low.
I'm, you know, I don't believe that. I haven't for some time believe that she's alive. You know, I know that there are miracles. I know that there are things that defy logic. I don't believe that this is one of those situations. I believe that that Summer is in heaven, but her body is out there somewhere, and it will tell us. It will tell her story when it's all said and done. And I hope and pray that that's the case. Whoever, by the way, is responsible for this, whoever, doesn't matter to me who's responsible. It's just when your eyes and ears tell you something, are you supposed to just because of what? Like you said, Chris, like why do we have to pretend like we're not hearing what we hear and what we're not seeing what we see? That doesn't make us less compassionate, but I can't fathom thinking of this any other way. I've tried, you know, I have.
Yeah, the internet has opened up darkness to the earth. You know, places that Gary and I used to be in all the time, and we're still there. But the point being, people don't understand how evil and how demonic the human spirit can be, and what the human spirit is capable of. But what you do see, and what we're seeing, and only the internet can do this, and allow a glimpse into the window. I tell kids all the time, there are two types of windows in a church building or in a place of worship. the type affixed to the building and the type that you bring into the building on your phones. If you open those windows on the phone, do they realize for the first time ever in a place of worship, and it doesn't matter, if you're worshiping nature, for the very first time, evil has a glimpse into your life while you're in a sacred environment. For the very first time in world history, we're at a whole new place here. And when we see Stephen Stearns, Gary and I have seen that guy so many times that when we see other people that have that same reflection, okay, you just go, you know what? There's more to the story here. Don't leave the house. Whatever that means. Just don't go away. When I was a vice detective from 1984 to 1986, I used to watch guys go into these dirty bookstores, and then I'd watch them come out, and their countenances would change. Literally. You could see that they had this expression of, what did I just do? And you know what? A lot of times they were dads, just regular old guys going in, because at that time the internet didn't exist. And so they had to go to places like that. You could physically see them changing. And there are a lot of studies right now that are going to be coming out where, they're looking at levels of, debauchery, for lack of a better term. I mean, think about that. Really think about that. What's going to happen one day if they legalize pedophilia? Do you realize all those pictures on Stern's phone would have no relevance to his behavior?
God.
Yeah, but we're headed that way. You heard it here first, out of my mouth. We are headed that way as a society. And when that happens, okay, the gates of hell, they're open already. Okay? Who would have thought? Who would have thought that a dead child in a bathroom on the floor named Matthew Checky would have started the family restroom movement in the country to prevent predatory behavior, when today anybody can walk into a bathroom where a 9-year-old is using the bathroom? Anyone can do it. Was his life in vain? I don't know. I stood over him, and I would submit to you, there's a lot of deviant behavior taking place around the United States and around, well, at least in our society, that's telling us we've opened the floodgates. And the next phase is going to be obvious. They're already talking about it. They're already teaching it in school. They're teaching it to a generation of children that will be desensitized. I stand firmly against it personally. That's just me. But I'm here to tell you, the fruits of that teaching will be devastating on our children.
I co-sign everything that you just said. I feel the exact same way. Psalms 127, verse 3 through 5. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward, like arrows in the hand of a warrior. So are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate.